Be that as it may. When I arrived at school, I indeed managed to get rid of too much thinking, so that I had a for the most part normal day in front of me. Since this well with its frothing ideas never ran dry entirely, I found myself a couple of times just sitting there and smiling. But fortunately I was able to cover it every time it happened, because it was probably highly inappropriate if I showed a grin while everyone was acquainted with the fact that it was going to be the toughest exam in our life so far. It would have been as paradox as rejoicing a bad mark. But since no one knew about the actual reason, I had to beware. Maybe in this circumstance it was favorable to not belong to the most popular students, as keeping a secret was way more difficult when you are being asked about it from all sides. Once they found out, there was no holding back. But disregarding my standing in the food chain of school, the topic my secret was referring to had undoubtedly the potential to go viral, whether people cared about me or not. And before that happened, I shut my mouth right away, even when it meant to kind of delude my friends. For diminishing the chance of someone accidentally blasting it out, it was a means to an end. I don't even want to think about what could have happened if I had distributed to whom my recent devotion belonged to. Some people would have admired me for sure. Like, how can you do that? Some likely stayed neutral and just looked at me not really caring about what I was doing. But some in return would have attacked me, I'm fairly certain about that. They would have scoffed at me, verbally or even physically. Why? I don't know. But when there are entities out there, for example obstructing and encroaching on the work of the ambulance or firefighters, who literally do nothing else than saving lives, then I don't want to witness what they would do to me. Someone who ruthlessly destroys life out of the craving for sensation would not flinch from destroying mine either. And since many of them use another ego, another mask, which is more appropriate for their routine, those people are mostly hard to discern. How do you say? The shadows come forth at nighttime. But anyway, that fear was only based on theory, wherefore it did nothing else than reminding me of being very careful. When I was done with my lessons, I could loosen the strings of caution encompassing my throat a little bit. Although mom's and dad's behavior was still hard to fathom, I could speak freely without the need to question everything I say or do. And the other person I stayed in close contact with was no problem, as she was kind of involved from the beginning anyway. In fact, she was the foundation for that, but also for progress as regards me. I'm speaking of Chloe, who kind of initiated the first interaction after the implemented plan, when she asked me via phone how my day was. I thanked her cordially and replied that due to our plan, the day had been saved. Only seconds after I had sent the message, I saw the next one from her in my inbox. This time she expressed her elation by using emojis, and furthermore added the question whether I had anything relevant left to do, as she referred to something of importance. She only wrote, "Things are developing." Although I had a slight hunch as to what she meant, I stayed passive, because there was always a high chance for surprise when being together with her. The morning when I left proved that, and speaking of that, I devoutly hoped that it wouldn't play a role later on when I visited her. After my homework, I namely planned to pay her a visit and investigate the standing of things. But when I did so, I simultaneously prayed for certain things to better remain in the shadows where I encountered them. Anyway, since I got over and done with my school preparations quite fast, I decided on leaving gradually. The only thing left on my mind, apart from my destination, represented my mother, who behaved as toxically as before. Albeit she didn't say it with her voice, her gazes spoke to me. I mainly tried to steer around those sharp rocks of awkwardness by coming forth with more common topics like school or what was going on in the world elsewhere. But sadly, the prime consequence was that she got even stranger and more evasive, which made it kind of impossible to maintain a conversation. At some point she only nodded a bit disturbed, and that was when I decided for myself that the right time to leave had come, as I couldn't coerce her to exchange with me. After all, the relationship between my mother and me most likely had a greater future perspective than the one between Chloe and me. so there was enough time later on for clearing the air. But for now, I had other priorities, which I dedicated myself to afterwards. With excitement and suspense alike, I maneuvered my car through the streets and then through the avenues. The houses and cars didn't catch my eye as much as last time, but still enough for me to lay extra focus on traffic. This time, I didn't have to look out for the address of 227 Wagner Ave, so only the other participants of traffic were of importance. Although I had visited only once, the houses were so conspicuous and unique, so that I knew exactly where my destination was situated. I would describe it as follows. Drive on Wagner Avenue until you see a big golden statue on the right side. The next house is it. The golden statue namely caught my attention even before the actual house of Chloe, and therefore represented a favorable beacon. However, as I turned off my car on the spot I parked the last time, I walked toward the entrance. Way more relaxed and secure than the first time, but still far away from a calm heartbeat. I was not by any means frightened of the actual message, as it served effectively as stepstone, but rather of the addendum as regards my observation this morning. My apprehension in this aspect intensified, but at the same time expedited my steps forward. Ultimately, with rapid strides, I reached the old wooden door, where I pushed the button of the pertaining bell. Within seconds, I could perceive steps inside, so I stroked through my hair to assure it was aligned properly. To my amazement though, when I could have a peek inside, there was no one I could have prepared myself for. It seemed like the door just opened without anyone actually opening it. Well, such mansions are susceptible to hauntings, aren't they? I mean, I even heard distinct footsteps from inside. I didn't really believe in such things like ghosts and so on, although this topic quite captivated me, not gonna lie. However, when I was inside I looked around, but still saw no signs of life. As a result, I closed the door and approached further. I approached the room where the little awkward incident happened at first, but as I perceived nothing, I continued walking into the center of the house, and from there up the stairs, straight to Chloe's room. I faintly knocked on the door while expecting anything to happen, as the scene so far seemed quite off. Like before, I suddenly perceived steps coming from behind the door. This time though, I prepared myself to push against it, so that I was able to investigate consecutively whether it just swung open on its own like it happened at the first time. So it came that I waited for the door pommel to move, and then directly pushed the door open. When I found myself inside, I looked around, and concluded that this time there was an actual reason for the door opening. Chloe namely, who was looking at me in the same weird way as I did before. She couldn't know that I was emulating the Ghostbusters, so she wondered, "Why are you in such a hurry? When I wrote you should come over, I didn't mean just now in this moment or within 5 minutes. But nevertheless, I'm glad to see you." This curious aspect of the situation somehow lifted the tension a little bit, but after we had hugged one another, I couldn't avoid asking, "Please tell me, do you accommodate ghosts here?" At first, she frowned at me basically like never before, but a little bit later that commuted into laughter, after which she replied amused, "Where does that question come from? Ghosts?" When she finished chuckling, I explained further. Because when I rang the bell, the door just went open and I stepped inside, but saw no one there. And I doubt that there is a function which opens it remotely via pressing a button. But even if so, then someone would have investigated who entered. Still smiling due to that apparent absurdity, she choked. That is correct. We don't have something like a full automatic door opener, but neither have we employed ghosts. How does that explication resonate? Imagine a man whose office is right next to the entrance, being so terribly busy that he just retreats into his office after opening the door. A woman being way too occupied to open the door in the first place. And a girl who told them about the arrival of a person so that they didn't need to care further about it. This girl is just waiting for conveying the cause of all that, but the person she was waiting for lunged at her and kind of caused a slight disturbance. But recuperated, She is willing to catch up with explaining everything. And in advance. It doesn't include a haunting. While flinching a little bit, I calmed myself down and took her elucidation as railing to grab onto. Yeah, I mean, I may have overreacted a little bit, but however. So what's up? She finished chuckling and initiated with a sober smile. You surely recall yesterday, when we spoke about future matters, right? Because the news is related to that. As I saw my expectation halfway fulfilled, I nodded and opened myself to anything further. We have done something. We have done something with my parents. My dad already mentioned the way my diagnosis changed them, and well, now you also have a role in that scenario. They were astonished by our closeness, you know, and in this regard, they caught up with something they haven't done for a long time. In fact, I heard it around the time you left. While perfectly following her, it almost blustered forth, and I saw it when I left. She immediately stared at me, but couldn't maintain that expression further, as she lapsed into loud laughter, while I kind of vindicated myself for saying that so pertly. After we both had calmed ourselves down consecutively, she proceeded. Yeah, I mean it is something natural, so just let them do what they're doing, Be that as it may, that was not the actual point. It was just one amusing incident of this morning. We namely affected my usually callous parents to that point that they came closer to each other. I think it happened when we talked about the locations we longed for visiting. We kind of infected them with wanderlust, as you saw when they disappeared from this reality for some moments. And the news is, they set themselves the intention to make a trip. The very thing they haven't agreed on for years. And with this momentum, they not only set the intention, but acted upon that, and consecutively booked a trip. Not exclusively for them, but also, in fact, they booked a trip for 4.